Are there things that you can do as a male to potentially increase your chances of meeting someone? Absolutely. As a guy who's been training for 35 plus years, I can say that, body game has greatly helped me in sort of like, meeting women. Chat. What's going on with your jawline? Julian here from Jawline Theory. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about body game. A lot of people seem to be hopping on body game, and I wanted to make a little video about basically body game throughout the ages, right? I sound like an old wizard when I say that. Firstly, shout out to Rom Wills. This is the gentleman who has coined the term body game. Going back to what I was saying, we never called it body game, right? Especially guys like us who started training in the 1980s and 1990s. It was simply termed working out, with perhaps the sole purpose of getting in shape, becoming a little healthier, possibly even emulating some of the guys we respected as amateur, I guess you can say, bodybuilders at the time, inspired by the old 90s physique, which I would say would be considered classic physiques. The Kevin Leronis, the Sean Rays, the Lee Haneys, etc. But to go back to what I was saying, body game didn't really have that implication, right? It wasn't really used to attract women. And I say this in all honesty because, firstly, we didn't have the apps. There were no Tinders and Hinges and stuff like that, and Facebook and Instagram. Nobody was sliding in anybody's DMs. We didn't have the internet, period. So the motivation for working out was really because you wanted to chat. What's going on with your body? And where are you on your fitness journey? Maybe you're in your 20s. Your 30s, maybe you're in your 40s, 50s, and possibly divorced, and you want to get back on the market. I get you. Let's get you looking real good. Let's get your body just right so you can present the best version of yourself and start attracting the attention that you deserve. I have 25 years of experience as a personal trainer. Let's assess your body and see where we can take it from there. Links are down below. Let's start working together and let's make this year your year. Love you guys. Links are down below. Let's get back to the video. So the motivation for working out was really because you wanted to maybe look a certain way, maybe feel good about yourself, and maybe you did it because you had other friends who were working out at the time. And I know when I was a kid, I certainly wasn't really interested in women when I was 12 or 13 at that age when I started working out. If anything, I had a fascination with comic books. And so most of us from the 80s, Generation X, we basically worked out because some of us had fascination with some of our comic book characters, the ones that we see on the big screen nowadays, the Superman, the Punisher, the Silver Surfer, guys like that. Wolverine as a Canadian, I really kind of liked Wolverine, the fact that he was this rugged superhero from the Yukon. And so back then, when you worked out at a gym, first of all, the gym was really comprised of very interesting cats. It wasn't really mainstream. In fact, I would go as far as saying that bodybuilding or just working out, period, was considered almost like a cult activity. Really, first of all, the gyms weren't really located in these great spots. Gyms typically were found in random locations. This is because the rent was cheap, and as an entrepreneur, you basically sought out spaces that were affordable, probably not in the best areas. I remember my early days in the gym had me going to some seedier parts of the city next to train tracks, maybe abandoned warehouses. That was the type of vibe that mostly a lot of people would set up these gyms, right? Not too many people went to the gym back then. Again, it was sort of like a cult thing that only the select few would participate in. And of course, back then, you had even less women attend the gym. I've done a video about that, but nonetheless, it was mostly guys, and those guys were sort of like an array of characters. You had bouncers, you had sometimes bodyguards, you had gear peddlers, you had ordinary guys, but for the most part, the gyms were a little more hardcore, and as a young guy, you kind of looked up to these guys, and, as a 12-year-old, you kind of learned from them and you stayed out of their way. Now, to get back to the whole body game thing as it relates to attraction and dating, again, we didn't have those apps, so you didn't post up videos, and you certainly didn't take any photos of yourself in the gym. I don't remember anyone bringing an analog camera to the workout room to snap a couple pictures. We just didn't do that. And so, because of that, I think a lot of people rarely saw guys in exceptional shape. You know, think about the 1990s. When you're walking around and you're jacked, it's kind of like very rare, especially back then. Nowadays, it's, I wouldn't say fairly common, but it definitely had a different level of notoriety, as let's say nowadays. Back then, I think the general population didn't really understand why someone would want to look like that and why they'd want to eat a lot of food and take that thing called protein a couple times a day. It was really weird and almost frowned upon. And so I think the general population saw bodybuilders as this weird cult group. And to be fair, bodybuilders didn't really do themselves any favors walking around in Zubaz. I'll leave a photo of what that looks like. And so even as a kid, I used to see these guys in the gym and I said how ridiculous they looked walking around in Zubaz and spandex and, you know, just weird. But fast forward 30 years now, and I see the importance of being in shape. In fact, I think most people would want to make significant improvements in their physique. And this has a lot to do with the culture of dating, modern dating, especially when it regards apps, things like Hinge, Tinder, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. Because of the way modern dating is set up nowadays, right? A lot of people sort of judge one another by their appearance. You know, that first contact you might make with someone might be on a dating app. Now, I know they're on their decline, but at the same time, for many people, that's how they met partners, right? And so, especially in regards to women, there are so many suitors, right, available for women that they pretty much respond to the top tier guys. And what I mean by this, you only have a few seconds to really make an impression when a girl is swiping left or right. I don't really know, but you know, there's not much time. And so this really highlights the importance of body game. And so nowadays the dating market has become almost commodified, and especially when it comes to the apps, a lot of women have, and men too, to a certain degree, but women are more selective. They use the filters. They want someone who's apparently 6 feet tall, someone who's in athletic shape, someone who earns a certain amount of money, etc., etc. And if you're not in that category, I almost feel like you don't stand a chance. Now, personally, I don't think that's true, but for the most part, I think a lot of guys sort of are striving to find themselves in this particular category, the guys who get a lot of play, right? And so with that being said, should men be upset with women? No, I don't think so. I think women have always sort of had an ideal when it comes to a partner. It's just that now it's like easier, right? They can just like make a couple adjustments and then boom, they get a list of guys who may or may not fall into that group. Are there things that you can do as a male to potentially increase your chances of meeting someone? Absolutely. You know, body game, which is widely talked about nowadays, I think is one thing. And, you know, as a guy who's been training for 35 plus years, I can say that, you know, body game has greatly helped me in sort of like, you know, meeting women. But I also want to encourage the younger guys out there to get on body game, because this is something that's going to be a lifelong journey. It will help you. It will instill discipline in you, something that you can transfer to maybe business, school, personal goals that you set your way. Working out on a regular basis and taking care of your nutrition, that takes a lot of work. So if you can sort of lock down those fundamentals, it's definitely something that could translate to other aspects of your life. And sadly, this is the state of modern dating, because I remember there was a time when, for those of you who are in your 40s, 50s, and even in your 60s, I know some of you have subscribed to my channel. Thank you very much. Some of you might remember chat lines, right? So briefly, what are chat lines? This is something that came about in the 1990s. Chat lines were a service that you would call. We had no internet, so you'd call in and you would hear a bunch of profiles, a bunch of voices, right? Women would say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm into this, I'm into that, I'm looking for a partner who likes long walks, blah, blah, blah. And if you like that particular profile, you would click the number 1 and you'd send a message, and then hopefully within a day or two that person would respond. Sometimes they wouldn't. And so those days, because there were no photos, There was nothing. There was no image. There was no video tethered to that voice. You basically had to rely on the voice. And so during that time, if that person responded to you, you got to sort of know who they were because you wouldn't meet right away. There was no such thing. You didn't even have a video. You didn't have a photo. There was no email to send a photo. A lot of people had not hopped onto the internet until much later. I'm talking about mid-90s here. So the idea of speaking to someone for a week or two, or sometimes a month, right? That's what you did back in the day. You wouldn't meet right away. It was very sketchy to meet someone from a chat line immediately. You took your time. And so sadly, this is really a Gen X thing, right? Those chat lines were introduced back then. And I think a lot of us who are in our late teens, early 20s, some of us jumped on it and we had a lot of fun. And, you know, what's interesting is that back then, you ended up meeting some really great people who sometimes became friends. Maybe once you met them, you realized there was no physical attraction, but maybe you realized that you had so much in common with that person that you could potentially become real friends and just do regular things like hang out, check out movies, etc. Now, one of the things I think a lot of the younger generation are suffering from is the inability to talk to women, because the chat lines were great for striking up a conversation, right? The chat lines were used as a way to understand how to listen to a woman. It was used to spit game, if you will. It was used to understand what she may want. You know what I mean? This was a very different thing that we had back then that I see a lot of young men, they just don't have that interaction with members of the opposite sex. Now, here's the thought. Why doesn't an app like Tinder have an option where you can leave an audio profile without divulging what you look like? In other words, a profile exclusively set to audio and there's no visual sort of guide. I wonder how many people would actually land some dates. And I don't think that would be a bad thing. I think it would be a great social experiment. But anyways, I don't want to ramble on too much, but let me know what you guys think about modern dating and as it relates to body game. Do you find, because I know most of my audience is male, so for all the males out there and some of the females, if you guys want to chime in, leave a comment. Do you think body game plays an important role in attraction nowadays, 2025, and now leading into 2026? Leave your comment down below, like, share, subscribe. Love you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.